So we're going to read off some tables from the IPCC. By the way, I don't know if I said this. This is chapter 7 from the IPCC AR6. You can easily go and find it online. I'm sure most of you know it, but I don't remember if I said it in the beginning of this series. Nonetheless, here is a summary of adaptation options for key risks associated with climate-sensitive vector, water, and foodborne diseases, VBDs, WBDs, and FBDs. So key risks, of course, will be VBD, WBD, and FBD, and there are tables for similar table for air pollution and so on. So geographic regions at higher risk, global. So this, with warming, the vector-borne diseases are going to spread their wings and go to higher and higher latitudes, which has already happened, as we mentioned, with malaria, chikungunya, dengue, West Nile, and so on. Consequences that would be considered severe and to whom: increase in the incidence of some VBDs such as malaria, dengue, and other mosquito-borne diseases in endemic areas and in new risk areas such as cities, mountains, and northern hemisphere. Hazard conditions that would contribute to this risk being severe: increased climatic suitability for transmission, example, enhanced vectorial capacity through temperature shift. Exposure conditions that would contribute to this risk being severe: large increases in human exposure to vector-driven growth in human and vector populations, globalization, population mobility, and urbanization. So COVID-19 gave us a clear picture of how quickly things move around, and in the beginning, in the first wave, there was some guesswork that maybe Africans are immune to it, maybe Indians are immune to it, and so on, but in the end everybody got hammered. Vulnerability conditions that would contribute to this risk being severe: few effective vaccines, weak health systems, ineffective personal and household protections, susceptibility to disease, poverty, poor hygiene conditions, insecticide resistance, and behavioral factors. Adaptation options with high potential for reducing risk. That's why I want to read them all off. Improved housing, better sanitation conditions, and self-protection awareness, especially for women and children. This makes a big difference. Insecticide-treated bed nets and indoor spraying of insecticide. Broader access to healthcare for most vulnerable. Establishment of disease surveillance and early warning systems for VBDs. Cross-border joint control of outbreaks. Effective vector control, targeted efforts to develop vaccines. Vaccines were developed quickly for COVID, whether more profit motives were driving it or real concern for humanity, whatever, it worked. And international cooperation happened, but not as extensively as it could, should, and so on. So here are the key references. Moving to waterborne diseases, mostly low and middle income countries are susceptible, Africa and Asia in particular, small islands, and global for Vibrios. Vibrio cholera is the main one, Vibrio cholerae, and that causes cholera, of course. There are also Vibrio vulnificus and parahemolyticus. Vulnificus causes kind of a septicemia, and parahemolyticus causes a diarrheal disease as well, coming from shellfishes and so on. These are environmental bacteria. They are in the water and can easily infect people when the concentrations are higher, and with warming you will have higher concentrations of Vibrios in higher latitudes as well. Increase in the occurrence and intensity of WBDs such as Vibrios, particularly Vibrio cholerae, diarrheal diseases, and other waterborne gastroenteric illnesses. Substantial changes in temperature and precipitation patterns drive them, along with increased frequency and intensity of extreme weather events. Examples given: droughts, storms and floods, ocean warming, and acidification. Okay, so what are the vulnerabilities? Large, I should just make sure. So exposure conditions and vulnerabilities. Large increases in exposure, particularly in flood-prone areas with poor sanitation and favorable ecological environments for waterborne disease pathogens. Okay, so Vibrio is one of them, but there are many snails. There are harmful algal blooms. There are the Helicobacter pylori, which causes ulcer, and so on and so forth. Vulnerability comes from poor hygiene conditions, lack of clean drinking water and safe food, flood and drought prone areas, and vulnerable water and sanitation systems. How to reduce risks? Adaptations, improved water and sanitation hygiene conditions and surveillance systems, improved personal drinking and eating habits, and behavioral change. Moving to foodborne diseases, global risks, everybody is vulnerable. Increase in the occurrence and intensity of foodborne diseases such as Salmonella and Campylobacter. I should have mentioned these here as well, including high income countries. So that those are the consequences that would be considered severe, and the populations. This is for hazard conditions that would trigger the risks. Substantial changes in temperature and precipitation patterns, increased frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, ocean warming and acidification, that's the same. Large increases in exposure, particularly in flood-prone areas with poor sanitation and favorable ecological environments for foodborne disease pathogens, same as waterborne disease pathogens. Poor hygiene conditions increase the risk, lack of clean drinking water and safe food, flood and drought prone areas, vulnerable water and sanitation systems, food storage systems and food processes, food preservation and cold chain storage. So Salmonella and Campylobacter are typically associated with uncooked food, fresh salads that are not clean, stored well, etc. So that's where that comes from. Improved wash conditions and surveillance systems are adaptation options, along with improved personal drinking and eating habits, behavior change, improved food storage, food processing, food preservation, and cold chain storage. Okay, I think I will leave this separately and come back and do summary of adaptation options for key health risks associated with heat, and then we have one on air pollution, and then we come back to it with malnutrition after going through this particular one. Okay, so let's leave this podcast relatively short, but that's okay, so we can have separate ones for each climate hazard for health. Okay.